Today on Appointed to Promote, it is part 2 of my prophetic list for 2024. What were the top 5 events that shaped our year, and what could be some of the top events to shape the new year? And so for all of your answers, stay tuned. Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to Appointed to Promote Television, where, as always, I cover current events via the biblical lens, and while never forgetting my main mission of this channel, which is promoting the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as always, I'm Ed Walsh, your host, happy and blessed to have you here and to be here with you for what today is my second part in my 2-part series on the top 10 prophetic happenings of the year 2024 and a look ahead to the new year. And thus, to see part 1 of this series, I've left a link up above for you, as well as in the description box of this episode for you to check out. And that would take us to my 5th top prophetic happening for 2024, of which was Middle East chaos and the fall of Syria. For on December the 8th of 2024, armed rebels took the Syrian city of Damascus, forcing longtime ruler and President Bashar al-Assad to flee the country, ending Assad's 54-year brutal rule in Syria. Now, it was the nation of Turkey who weighed in on the side of the rebels, thus arming them to fight the government troops, and just 13 days later, Syria was liberated and Assad had to flee to Russia. Oh, but don't feel too bad for Bashar, for him and the entire Assad family managed to escape with about $158 billion on their person. But the question now becomes, who will ultimately fill the void in Syria? Well, that would be a man by the name of Mohammed al-Bashir, Syria's current caretaker prime minister, as well as Ahmed al-Shara, who also has taken over a key role within the nation. Now, both al-Bashir as well as al-Shara are representing themselves in a moderate persona, thus even dropping their Islamic name to go back to their birth name. Yet, my friends, do not get too excited over this leadership group, for they have both a deep history in Al-Qaeda as well as with ISIS. But perhaps the bigger thing we should worry about is the nation of Turkey, who is now firmly entrenched in the country and also with intention to wipe out the often US-backed Kurds. And as for Israel's role in these current events, well, stay tuned for more shortly on that. But the key important question here as prophetic students of the Bible is, are we starting to literally see the chess pieces themselves being laid out in Syria for the eventual destruction of Damascus, as prophesied right here in the book of Isaiah, chapter 17. This message came to me concerning Damascus. Look, the city of Damascus will disappear. It will become a heap of ruins. The towns of Aror will be deserted. Flocks will graze in the streets and lie down undisturbed, with no one to chase them away. The fortified towns of Israel will also be destroyed, and the royal power of Damascus will end. All that remains of Syria will share the fate of Israel's departed glory, declares the Lord of heaven's armies. And so, my friends, keep an eye on these current developments within Syria and the city of Damascus, especially while you can. And with that, let us continue to now move up the ladder ever further on my prophetic list to number 4, of which is wars and rumors of wars. And so, my friends, what could be bigger than World War III, and of which you have plenty of power cakes, including North versus South Korea, China continuing to threaten Taiwan, Israel against its Middle Eastern enemies and neighbors, and then there's the Russian-Ukrainian war, of where we must ask, are we actually beginning to see the events of World War III literally taking place? For this war began on February the 22nd of 2022, when the world watched Russia invade its neighboring country of Ukraine. And it is this war which has created a dividing line between those countries supporting Russia with the Western nations of the world supporting the Ukraine. Meanwhile, countries such as China, North Korea, Iran, among others, have been supporting the Russian cause, of which North Korea has even sent troops to fight in the battle. Meanwhile, European countries have thus given more money to the Ukraine than anyone, yet it is the United States who has been the single greatest backer of Zelensky, in which it is currently committed $183 billion to the Ukrainian cause. And it is the Biden administration who has now committed another $1.2 billion of aid to the Ukraine before it leaves office in January of 2025. And where latest reports currently show 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died, with 370,000 wounded since the start of the war. Meanwhile, Russian losses and wounded have combined for a total 700,000 soldiers. Thus, how will the future of this war evolve? Now with a change in president in the United States? Of that, only time will tell. With that said, we now move on to number 3 on my prophetic list for 2024, of which is the rise of anti-Semitism globally. For on October the 7th of 2023, Hamas attacked Israel, of which 1,400 were murdered, 4,000 wounded, and 200 Israelis were kidnapped. And immediately following those attacks, the entire world mourned with the nation of Israel. Until they didn't. For in all, there were more than 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents in just the U.S. alone since Hamas' October 7 attacks. And that, my friends, is the highest number of incidents reported in any single year since the group started keeping track in 1979. As college campuses fueled the hate, where Jewish students were attacked and Jewish professors were locked out from their very campus access and credentials. Verbal, written harassment, vandalism, and physical assault all were the norm, where over 1,840 cases of vandalism and 150 cases of physical assault were also reported. And in Europe, a recent survey showed 96% of Jewish respondents encountered anti-Semitism in the year before the survey. Meanwhile, over 70% hide their Jewish identity, and around half say that they now worry about the safety of their very families. And my friends, not to be outdone by the very poster boys of anti-Semitism, that being the United Nations itself, who in 2024 posted 23 resolutions condemning the nations of the world, yet 17 of them came against the very Jewish state alone. And my friends, I could go on. Therefore, all I can say is that for us as Christians, we must remember what Genesis chapter 12 tells us about blessing Israel and thus being blessed versus cursing Israel and thus being cursed. And with that, what is it that God himself says about his nation? Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for light by day and the fixed order of the moon and the stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares the Lord, then shall the offspring of Israel cease from being a nation before me forever. And look for more information on this topic from me at ATP in 2025. And with that one in the books, we now move ever closer to the top prophetic event by now going to number 2, of which is President Trump's re-election. Well, my friends, I'm not really sure where these next 4 years will take us prophetically. But I have absolutely no doubt that as God raises up kings and also takes them down, that he has raised back up President Trump for a reason. For the former 45th and now 47th President of the United States won the 2024 election in convincing fashion, and even by taking all 7 swing states, as well as becoming the first Republican president to win the popular vote since 2004, and likely thus completed the greatest political comeback in American history. And not only that, but it was Time magazine itself who went on to name President Trump as its Man of the Year for 2024. And all of this after not surviving 1 or 2, but potentially even 3 assassination attempts. And where it is President Trump who vows to go after the deep state, government corruption, to seal up the nation's borders and to send illegals packing, as well as to end the trans madness and to fix the U.S. economy. And as for faith, he had this to say.
Religion and Christianity are the biggest things missing from this country, and I truly believe that we need to bring them back, and we have to bring them back fast. I think it's one of the biggest problems we have. That's why our country is going haywire. We've lost religion in our country. All Americans need a Bible in their home, and I have many. It's my favorite book. It's a lot of people's favorite book. Religion is so important. It's so missing, but it's going to come back, and it's going to come back strong, just like our country is going to come back strong. In the end, we do not answer to bureaucrats in Washington. We answer to God in heaven. Christians are under siege. We must protect content that is pro-God. We love God, and we have to protect anything that is pro-God. We must defend God in the public square and not allow the media or the left-wing groups to silence, censor, or discriminate against us. We have to bring Christianity back into our lives and back into what will be again a great nation. Our founding fathers did a tremendous thing when they built America on Judeo-Christian values. Now that foundation is under attack, perhaps as never before. We must make America pray again. Pray, get educated, get motivated, and stand with me and the legions of Americans asking God to bless our great nation, to bring our great nation back, and to make America great again.
But that is in America. Yet I think where God himself will likely use President Trump the most is in his relations with the other countries of the world, and especially that of the nation of Israel. Yet can he also help with Russia and the Ukraine, China and Taiwan, and again the Middle East mess, where the Biden administration was often hypocritical and two-faced in their very dealings with the Jewish nation. Yet during his first presidency, it was Trump himself who was likely one of the very best presidential friends to the nation of Israel that it may have ever had. And thus, if President Trump adheres to this very same standard as from his first administration, I'm sure the very blessings from God himself will fall upon the American nation. More to follow. Therefore, it's time for us Christians not to sit back and relax, but rather to put the pedal to the metal. And under this administration, to work harder than ever for the gospel of Jesus Christ and to stand up and defend the Jewish people in all while God still gives us the opportunity to do so. And thus, we finally now come to the #1 prophetic event of my channel for the year 2024 is the nation of Israel and its fight for survival. And how can anything else in this day and age be #1 than God's very own prophetic time clock itself, which is the nation of Israel? And to say that the year of 2024 was not a prophetic one in the happenings of this Jewish nation would be like saying bacon and eggs are not a breakfast combo, as the nation of Israel itself made its mark by proving that oftentimes the best defense can be a good offense. For Israel survived the continued bombardments of missiles and rockets from Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and 2 attacks of missiles and drones from Iran in both April and October. And Israel followed with counterattacks on Iran days after the Iranian offensive, and have seriously now weakened Tehran's air defense and missile production capabilities. And as for Hezbollah in Lebanon, well, it was on October the 1st with IDF ground soldiers as well as countless airstrikes nearly wiping out Hezbollah's missiles, rockets, and launchers in southern Lebanon, while also systematically assassinating all of Hezbollah's key leadership, as well as Hamas' key leader, that being Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of the October 7th attacks, of whom, my friends, I now am pretty confident in saying is not enjoying any of those 70 virgins while sitting in the pits of hell. And not to be outdone, let's follow that up with Israel's attacks on the Syrian army's strategic capabilities, where in 48 hours it destroyed 80% of the fallen Assad regime's capabilities, thus keeping them from the Islamic radicals who would look to use those weapons against them. And it was even Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself who stood with IDF forces on the Syrian side of Mount Hermon and promised that Israel will remain within Syria's borders at least until the end of 2025. And finally, Israel struck Houthi ports and energy infrastructure near Yemen's capital in response to their attacks against the Jewish state, of which has now left the Houthis themselves a bit too preoccupied to worry about the Jewish state, at least for now. So my friends, can you see the hand and promises of God continue to remain upon the Jewish people and nation, even in their disbelief? For it was God himself who said of his people in the book of Deuteronomy, "Blessed are you, Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord. He is your shield and helper, your glorious sword. Your enemies will cower before you, and you will tread on their heights." And again, for all my viewers, I will continue to have more updates prophetically and geopolitically on the Jewish nation throughout 2025. So, can you yourself see the prophetic happenings? And thus, what can we watch for in 2025? Well, it's safe to say that all eyes will be on the nation of Israel and the United States. Where with President Trump now back at the helm, what will we see form geopolitically? Through his leadership, we'll look for Trump to effect a new change of policy as it pertains to the Russian-Ukraine war. Expect the removal of funding to Iran while also placing sanctions on the Islamic Republic. And look for a restored relationship between the U.S. and Israel, as well as a ramp up once more of the Abraham Accords. And I will even go on to predict that we will see an Israeli attack of Iranian nuclear facilities in the year 2025, and attacks even possibly help assisted by the U.S. Could these events that we are seeing play out thus advance us to setting the stage for the Ezekiel invasion that the Bible prophesies about? And don't forget again about the nation of Turkey, artificial intelligence, digital IDs, the financial crisis, and I didn't even talk about the continued push for the one world religion or even the next pandemic. And so as Christians, we can ask the question, could this be the year of the Lord's ultimate return, thus being to receive his church? Yet even if not, again, as I said, we can simply not sit back and watch all of this shaping up take place before our very eyes, without us giving out the truth of salvation in Jesus Christ alone, and that being to any that we know and or love. In all, while also standing up for the people of Israel, the Jewish state, and against the lies of anti-Semitism, which, my friends, definitely come from the pits of hell. So the question is, are you ready? And as well, is your house ready? For my friends, if you truly don't know God, now is the time, and of which it is only God himself who has the right and power to judge. And my friends, his standard for judgment is perfection. For it is the Bible, my friends, that tells us that if we sin just one time and break any one of God's commandments, that we have thus broken them all. So my friends, if you have lied, cheated, stolen, coveted, lusted, used God's holy name as a mere cuss word, and put anything into your life before God, then my friends, you have a sin problem. But the difference here for me and for you is Jesus. For Jesus came to earth and humbled himself as a man, sharing the good news of the gospel, as well as healing the sick, feeding the multitudes, and raising the dead. He was then raised from the dead on the third day after his brutal criminal's death upon a cross by crucifixion, in thus taking every single one of your sins upon his person. Therefore, what you must do to receive God's free gift of grace is to admit that you're a sinner, believe that God raised Jesus from the dead, and call upon him for salvation. And at that time, God will no longer see your sins and imperfections, but rather the perfection and holiness of his Son. Therefore, my friends, please do not delay, for Jesus is the only way and the only bridge back to God the Father. Thus, receive him and do so today. So with that said, again, my friends, that brings us to the end of my top 10 prophetic countdown for 2024 and peek into 2025. And if you like the program and you're new to things, hey, do me a favor, comment, like, and subscribe to help me get the good news of the gospel out to the masses. And so with that, stay tuned for more of what I have coming for you prophetically in 2025. And with that said, I'm going to leave you today with my signature Bible verse and life verse, which comes to us from the book of Colossians chapter 2 and verse 8, of which tells us, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather according to Christ." And so again, Happy New Year to you and yours, and until I see you next time, my friends, God bless.